of Ridley's commercials. And this was his first feature film, and he stepped in a few weeks into principal photography. And he was perfect casting from the very beginning, and really never missed a beat, was able to get inside Jim's head and give Jim exactly what he wanted, which our first DP did not feel comfortable doing.
Dick Bush started the film, and I'd worked with Dick on several movies before that. I mean, he's a very nice man and very talented cameraman. Unfortunately, I think the chemistry between Jim and Dick didn't work, as it doesn't in some cases.
Any Jim Cameron movie is a tough atmosphere. Jim is a very demanding director. Some people are afraid of that. Some people find that a negative. Some people don't like it when directors get upset because you're not doing exactly what they want you to do. I don't. I think that there is a genius of Jim Cameron. I think that he is cursed with a vision. He knows exactly what he wants to see, and it's your job to get it on screen for him.
Gail had told me that, Gail Ann Hurd had told me that the DP had told her that he couldn't make the schedule. He said, this schedule is just ridiculous and I can't make it. And I said, well, look, if he tells you that he can't make the schedule, you have to fire him. He has to go. Because then there is no chance. I mean, it's just stupid on his part to do that. But he's doing great work, and he said yes, but still, he has now said he has no intention of making the schedule. At least you have to start off with the intention of doing it.
Dick, who since passed away, was a tremendous director of photography, but he was a lighting cameraman in the traditional English lighting cameraman tradition, which is to say that he didn't want to hear what the director's vision was. He felt that he would read the script, see the set, and light it the way he wanted it.
Here we go, and action.
There's a scene when they're going into the atmosphere processing station, and Jim really wanted it lit by the miners' lights. And, he wanted it to be spooky, and he didn't want to be able to see all the details. And Dick lit it. It was side lit. It was bright. It did not feel at all as if it was being lit by the lights and the helmets, and it completely destroyed the vision that Jim had for that sequence. And I remember at the time thinking, oh no, this isn't going to work. Jim is really an auteur director, and he had a vision of how it should be lit, and not only that, but Jim is a cameraman.
It wasn't that Dick Bush did a bad job. It was just he just politically made a terrible mistake. The cameraman cannot be dictating.
I remember having to say to him, this is Jim's movie, this is Jim's vision. And he said, well, if that's the case, if I can't do my job, which is to light it the way I want it, you better find someone else. And we did.
There's a story behind how I got cast for the movie that I don't know if you know or not, but I'd worked with Jim Cameron before, obviously, on The Terminator. And when I read the script Aliens, I thought it was extremely exciting. It looked like a lot of fun. I really wanted to do it. And Jim actually cast another actor in the role of Hicks.
I was like home one day. It was a Friday night, Saturday night, something like that. I got a call from my agent, said, listen, can you take a call from Gail Hurd? I'm like, yeah. Gail called me up. She said, can you come over to play this role? And I was like, Friday evening. I'm like, she says, is your passport in order? I'm like, yeah. And she said, it's probably a good thing, because otherwise they probably would have found another actor whose passport was in order, She said, can you be here Monday morning, take over this role? And I said, yeah, absolutely.
Michael Biehn came over, essentially over a weekend, and jumped right in. I don't think you would ever know that he hadn't been cast for the role from the very beginning. And I know, he had no time to prepare. But that's the joy of having worked with someone before, and someone who's as fine an actor as Michael is. He was able to immediately get into the part.
To me, it's like every boyhood's fantasy to play these sort of roles. You know, these are the roles that I used to dream about when I was a kid, you know. Tough fighters, you know, who have all this courage, and you know, it's great.
So I came in, they'd done all the rehearsals, and they had actually been shooting for a week, so I took that actor's wardrobe, and I took his salary, and I took his billing, and I took everything else, and just slipped right in. And the only thing that really bothered me about taking over his role and his costume and everything is he was the Marine, and he had, it works out. When you see it now, it's kind of nice because it's Hicks and everything, and maybe he's a better actor than I am, and so, but he had this heart. He had it on his armor, and of course I wore his armor, and it was a heart, and it was right over his heart, and I just thought, but it was like this bright pink or bright red. Everything else was, you know, camouflage and like green, dark green, you know, and bright red right over his heart. And I thought, God, it just looks like somebody like aim, you know, that's like, you know, like a bullseye, you know, where his heart is. So I didn't like that. But other than that, you know, that's how it worked out for me. So I came over, and they had already been shooting. So I picked up a couple of quick scenes and got right into it and didn't have to go through all the Marine marching exercises, you know, and listen to some Marine, you know, tell us how we should act and so on and so forth.
The movie cost $18 million, which, if you think about it now, that's not even the advertising budget for a little indie movie. We shot it at Pinewood Studios in England, and we were actually based there throughout post-production.
Aliens was a very difficult job. It wears on you. All we were doing was working. We would work, and we'd go home late, and get up, go work, and come back, and it was just a work fest for almost a year. So it was pretty tough. And Jim is demanding, obviously, and he just won't, you know, he's like a bulldog. He gets hold of something, he won't let go until it's the way he wants it. He won't take no for an answer, so, which we knew. We knew going in.
Jim's hands-on approach was, for a floor crew person as myself, great. Sometimes became difficult to deal with because he was so knowledgeable technically and such a great artist. There was absolutely nothing that you could pull the wool over his eyes on. And so you had to be spot on the ball every day, all the time.
He knows everybody's job, so he doesn't suffer fools lightly. The only thing he can't do is he can't act. So that was cool for the actors, you know, because we didn't have to listen to Jim tee off on you about acting.
As an actor, you could do something, and he would say, that's exactly what I don't want, you know? Now, big deal. I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but there are a lot of actors around there, what? You know, that's so insensitive that you would say that to me, and so on and so forth. And I think he's the same way with crew, you know? Get this is fucking bullshit. Bring me something that fucking looks right, you know?
And I did this in about 8 seconds when we were lining up this scene. It worked perfectly. I've got it on my video. Okay. Too bad I wasn't shooting 35 mil. Okay, stick it up there. Let's see what you got. Okay. All right, now pull it so it lands right on the lens when I say action. There we go, and action. Like a flying facehugger. Wasn't terribly convincing. Guys, I want you to pull it so that it looks like it's leaping. Doesn't look like it's leaping. Don't you have gloves? You should get some gloves. You can't pull hard without gloves. Get some gloves and call me when you're ready for this.
The working set was, it was not without its tension, but in part it's because of the culture clash. And you had a young, dynamic American director who knew exactly what he wanted and could get what he wanted. If there were 100 of him, he could get exactly what he wanted. And I think that probably had an effect in terms of the tension level on the set. Because a lot of these people, you know, on the crew, they weren't invested in Jim's vision in the way that we were. So, you know, who can blame them for sort of just treating it like it's another job?
I think the rudest thing I ever heard was the British referring to Jim Cameron as Grizzly Adams, because at that time he had a beard. And I heard him say stuff like that, and I thought, there's something wrong here. And the truth of it was that here you have this sweet-looking Gail Hurd come in, you know, who looks like a pixie, you know, and Jim, and they're coming in to make this huge movie on the heels of Ridley Scott's success with Alien. And I think they kind of resented it.
The British crew, who were excellent, but they were big Ridley fans, and I think it was very tough for Jim because I don't think they'd seen Terminator, and he kept trying to have showings, and none of them would go. And so I think that it took them a while to realize how brilliant he was, and he's Canadian, you know. But I think that was difficult too.
The whole movie was an experience that we didn't think would be as good as the initial Aliens to start with.
They were a bit off their pins, as they would say, with having a woman producer.
The English were by then quite used to having women producers. Certainly no problem about her being a woman. You know, her personality wasn't everybody's favorite, you know, from the crew. Neither was Jim's, actually. There was a lot of tension between the British crew and Jim.
There was a little clash here and there between Jim and certain other crew members. Most notably, probably between Jim and his first AG, Derek Cracknell.
Some guy kept saying to me, actually, I think it was the first AD. I mean, he kept calling me love and sweetheart.
Pick the stool up, love.
You know, but after a while, I said, you got to stop. I told Jim to stop saying that to me because it's so inappropriate for the character, and it wasn't really good. So.
The first time I walked on the set, I told you the story. The AD put his hand on my chest, and nobody ever touched me like that. Stopping me. And I'm being from New York. I said to him, "You ever touch me again, I'm gonna kick your ass." And the next thing he did was say, "All right, bring in the artiste." And I said, "Man, you really are a wise guy," because I thought he was like putting us down, and I didn't realize the British call people artistes. And it's even though we speak the same language, it's a different language. I mean, they're different than us. They invented the language, but boy,
I know Jim clashed with them.
Just because of tea time, though. Came at all the wrong moments, that's all. Right before an explosion, generally.
We'd be getting ready to shoot. It was about 9:30. The stage door, which is, everyone's probably seen these doors, this huge door would roll open. And all our smoke would start pouring out, and we would go, "What's going on?" This is about the first time it happened. And this woman would come in with a little tea cart. And she'd have a big urn of hot water or tea, and it was break time. And this is something that here in the U.S. we didn't do at the time. It's probably changed now. But they would stop everything and have tea. And I know Jim had some concerns about that on the main unit set.
I mean, Jim is a very, very passionate, hard-driving type of a guy. And he is, even at that time, could be, insensitive to people's needs if it got in the way of making the movie that he wanted to make.
I'm afraid I wasn't around when this tea lady's trolley was damaged or whatever happened to be allegedly damaged.
I used to help out the tea lady. I'd go over there and help her out, so it must have been on a day that I wasn't there.
That's a union regulation in England, so you're going to have a tea break, whether you murdered the tea lady or not. There'd be somebody there the next day at the same time.
We were used to having no breakfast. Everybody would turn up in the morning. They'd start work at 10 o'clock. Somebody would arrive with a trolley with some tea and a few grotty cheese rolls on it. It would be there for 15 minutes and then it would go. So when it turned up, everybody wanted to go and get their cup of tea and roll.
You would suddenly find an exodus of people going to grab this food because if you didn't get there first, there was no food left. And it's a long day with no food. So the problem is that I think caused him some grief.
If you've got that supplied to you all day long, it's not quite so important to go and get a cup of tea and a cheese roll because it's only there for 15 minutes. So I think the whole English tea thing has been blown out of all perspective.
Look, first of all, the stagecraft and the craftsmanship in general that the English did for this movie was second to none. I mean, these guys are great craftsmen, and they take their work seriously. But I think the pace of the way the work is done is much more laid back. I mean, there's a tea break at 10 o'clock, and then there's a long lunch, and most of the crew end up going to the pub that's actually, can you imagine a studio lot here with a bar? Do they have those? I don't think so. And then you'd come back, and then you'd shoot for a few hours, and then you'd have a tea break at 4, and it just was a very kind of laid back, kind of traditional way of making a film. Nothing wrong with it. But there was a tremendous time constraint and budget constraints to make this movie, work. So Jim, was pressed to just squeeze every moment he could to get another shot.
They do a draw at the end of the week. Everybody puts in £5 or something, and at the end of every week, they draw out of a thing, and whoever wins gets all the money. So it's like, you win £300 or £400 or something like that. And I remember them doing that on a Friday, and them wanting to do this draw at the end of the day. But it was like while they were working, And Jim was pissed. He was like, "No, man, we're working here, man. Fuck the draw, We got to get this last shot we have to get,
And they came around and were right in the middle of setting up a shot, and they walk up to Jim and say, "You're going to put some money in for this?" And Jim looked at the guy, and the guy just wanted to crawl in a hole, because Jim could not relate to what was going on. It was like they were having a party, and Jim was at war to finish this movie. It was a war. Really, when you start a movie, when you're on a movie, it is a war. The train has left the station. It's not going to stop till it ends, and it's a war. At one point, I remember Jim and Gail coming on the set making an announcement saying, "Look, if you guys don't shape up, we're going to pull the movie and go somewhere else." And they're all laughing, going, "Well, where are you going to get another crew?" He said, "We're going to fire the whole crew." And, they weren't kidding. They really weren't kidding.
The day I turned up on the set, there was practically a strike and a riot all in one. And I remember the first AD telling me, "Gee, you picked a bad day to come and do your day's filming. We're all walking out."
We fired the first assistant, and then then there was a rebellion by the actors and the crew to get him hired back. And I was unfortunately out of the town at the moment. And they hired him back. I thought, well, this is that was kind of unfortunate in my opinion.
There were lots of meetings on this film about working conditions, because as I said, we were working on a very hard production. Everybody who's making a film wants to work 24 hours a day, who's in charge. And unfortunately, that's not possible, and neither is it a good idea, to work, really, really long days. So directors tend not to, get tired, because I think in reality there's a lot of adrenaline going on, and we try and help that situation, but sometimes I think tempers flare, and that's probably what happened. But clearly, all these meetings must have been resolved, because the final end result is there on the screen, and I don't recall any time when we weren't about to work. So, I certainly don't remember ever having any days off. So it couldn't have proceeded to a full strike.